Welcome and welcome back to the channel. The channel is called Thank God for Grace and Mercy. My name is Tony, and we're currently doing a series that I like to call Reading the Bible in a Year. Basically, what I do every day is I come here and I'll read a few verses from the Bible. I'll let you know what those are in the beginning, so you'll know today is day 74. So we're going to be reading Deuteronomy 11 through 13. So I'll read that first in my Message Bible, which is a paraphrased Bible written in modern English. Makes it a little easier to read. The names are still just as hard as ever. All the geography is just as hard to pronounce as ever, but it's a simpler, modern written Bible, so it's a little easier to understand. And then I go through and I follow up with the Bible recap. So this is a book by Tara Lee Cobble, and she breaks down the readings much better than I can. So the purpose of this channel was just for me, just to read the entire Word of God. It's something I've never done before. I've read pieces and parts. I've read it, had it read to me at church. Might have, done little Bible studies on bits and parts of the Bible, but I've never really studied the whole Bible, and so that's what we're going to do this year. So if you're just joining us, don't feel like you have to go back and catch up on the whole thing. I mean, you can if you want to, but you could just start today. And if you join in every day, it takes between 15 and 25 minutes. I've never had one go over, none's gone over 30. But most of the time they're around 20 minutes, I'd say is a good average. But if you'll join me every day for the rest of the year, you'll read the whole Bible too and get a chance to study it. And hopefully you can do this when you're just taking a walk or washing the dishes or whenever you can find 20 minutes in a day. It's blessed me a lot, and I think it'll bless you too. So anyway, thank you for being here. Thank you for joining. A lot of times I'll have my 2 cents. I might talk about yesterday's scriptures. If you've got ideas or you've got other things, how we learn is we learn from each other. So put those in the comments below, so we all can learn something different. Yesterday we were in Deuteronomy 8 through 10. The day before was 5 through 7. So in 5 through 7, big takeaway was their warning about fear and fearful thinking, and fear comes from not following God's plan, and not knowing God's plan, or doubting God's plan. So yesterday was more about pride. Was having the thoughts of more prideful thinking, where warning the people of Israel here, not to think, oh, look at all I've done, look at all the wealth I have accumulated through the power of my strength and my hand. That's prideful thinking. People still need to remember what God has done for them and how God has blessed them. The other thing was being prideful about your own righteousness. Look how righteous we are. God's given us this land. God's gifts are, His blessings are a gift. And we don't really deserve it. But God gives it to us anyway. So it's pretty amazing. So that's what I kind of got from yesterday, was about prideful thoughts, and how the way to avoid those thoughts is to focus on God, and not really focus on ourselves or our problems or our enemies, but keep our focus on God. So without any further ado, we'll say a short prayer, and today we're going to be getting into Deuteronomy 11 through 13. So dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for all your blessings. Lord, please help us keep our thoughts on you, so we don't become prideful and don't think we've done it all by ourselves, or we're so righteous that we're just deserving, because we're not. So help us remember that, Lord, so we don't lose focus on where the joy is, and that's with you, Lord. Lord, these verses have been so great here in Deuteronomy. I'm sure today is going to be great as well. Please open our eyes to see the message today, open our ears to hear it, and open our hearts to receive it. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Deuteronomy 11. So love God, your God, Guard well his rules and regulations. Obey his commandments for the rest of time. Today it's very clear that it isn't your children who are front and center here. They weren't in on what God did, didn't see the acts, didn't experience the discipline, didn't marvel at his greatness, the way he displayed his power in the miracle signs and deeds that he let loose in Egypt on Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and all his land, the way he took care of the Egyptian army, its horses and chariots, burying them in the waters of the Red Sea as they pursued you. God drowned them. And you're standing here today alive. Nor was it your children who saw how God took care of you in the wilderness up until the time you arrived here. What he did to Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, son of Reuben, how the earth opened its jaws and swallowed them with their families, their tents, and everything around them, right out of the middle of Israel. Yes, it was you, your eyes, that saw everything great that God did. So it's you who are in charge of keeping the entire commandment that I command you today. It says you'll have the strength to invade and possess the land that you are crossing the river to make your own. Your obedience will give you a long life on the soil that God promised to give your ancestors and their children, a land flowing with milk and honey. The land you are entering to take up ownership isn't Egypt, the land you left, where you had to plant your own seed and water it yourselves as in a vegetable garden. But the land you're about to cross the river and take for your own is a land of mountains and valleys. It drinks water that rains from the sky. It's a land that God, your God, personally tends. He's the gardener. He alone keeps his eye on it all year long. From now on, if you listen obediently to the commandments that I'm commanding you today, love God, your God, and serve him with everything you have within you, he'll take charge of sending the rain at the right time, both autumn and spring rains, so that you'll be able to harvest your grain, your grapes, your olives. He'll make sure there's plenty of grass for your animals. You'll have plenty to eat. But be vigilant, lest you be seduced away and end up serving and worshiping other gods, and God erupts in anger and shuts down heaven so there's no rain and nothing grows in the fields. And in no time at all, you're starved out, not a trace of you left on the good land that God is giving you. Place these words on your hearts. Get them deep inside you. Tie them on your hands and foreheads as a reminder. Teach them to your children. Talk about them wherever you are, sitting at home or walking in the street. Talk about them from the time you get up in the morning until you fall into bed at night. Inscribe them on the doorposts and gates of your cities so that you'll live a long time and your children with you on the soil that God promised to give your ancestors for as long as there is a sky over the earth. That's right. If you diligently keep all this commandment that I command you to obey, love God, your God, do what he tells you, stick close to him, God on his part will drive out all these nations that stand in your way. Yes, he'll drive out nations much bigger and stronger than you. Every square inch on which you place your foot will be yours. Your borders will stretch from the wilderness to the mountains of Lebanon, from the Euphrates River to the Mediterranean Sea. No one will be able to stand in your way. Everywhere you go, God sent fear and trembling will precede you, just as he promised. I brought you today to the crossroads of blessing and curse. The blessing. If you listen obediently to the commandments of God, your God, which I command you today. The curse. If you don't pay attention to the commandments of God, your God, but leave the road that I command you today, following other gods of which you know nothing. Here's what comes next. When God, your God, brings you into the land you are going into to make your own, you are to give out the blessing from Mount Gerizim and the curse from Mount Elba. After you cross the Jordan River, follow the road to the west through Canaanite settlements in the valley near Gilgal and the oaks of Moreh. You are crossing the Jordan River to invade and take the land that God, your God, is giving you. Be vigilant. Observe all the regulations and rules I'm setting before you today. Deuteronomy 12. These are the rules and regulations that you must diligently observe for as long as you live in this country that God, the God of your fathers, has given you to possess. Ruthlessly demolish all the sacred shrines where the nations that you were driving out worship their gods, wherever you find them, on hills and mountains or in the groves of green trees. Tear apart their altars, smash their phallic pillars, burn their sex and religion Asheran shrines, Break up their carved gods. Obliterate the names of those god sites. Stay clear of those places. Don't let what went on there contaminate the worship of God, your God. Instead, find the site that God, your God, will choose and mark it with his name as a common center for all the tribes of Israel. Assemble there. Bring to the place your absolution offerings and sacrifices, your tithes and tribute offerings, your vow offerings, your free will offerings, and the firstborn of your herds and flocks. Feast there in the presence of God, your God. Celebrate everything that you and your families have accomplished under the blessing of God, your God. Don't continue doing the things the way we're doing them at present, each of us doing as we wish. Until now, you haven't arrived at the goal, the resting place, the inheritance that God, your God, is giving you. But the minute you cross the Jordan River and settle into the land of God, your God, is enabling you to inherit, he'll give you rest from all your surrounding enemies. You'll be able to settle down and live in safety. From then on, at the place that God, your God, chooses to mark with his name as the place where you can meet him, bring everything that I command you, your absolution offerings and sacrifices, tithes and tribute offerings, and the best of your vow offerings that you vow to God. Celebrate there in the presence of God, your God. You and your sons and daughters, your servants and maids, including the Levite living in your neighborhood, because he has no place of his own in your inheritance. Be extra careful. Don't offer your absolution offerings just any place that strikes your fancy. Offer your absolution offerings only in the place that God chooses in one of your tribal regions. There and only there are you to bring all that I command you. It's permissible to slaughter your non-sacrificial animals like gazelle and deer in your towns and eat all you want from them with the blessing of God, your God. Both the ritually clean and unclean may eat. But you may not eat the blood. Pour the blood out on the ground like water, nor may you eat the tithe of your grain, new wine or olive oil, nor the firstborn of your herds and flocks, nor any of the vow offerings that you vow, nor your freewill offering and tribute offerings. All these you must eat in the presence of God, your God, in the place of God, your God, chooses. You, your son and daughter, your servant and maid, and the Levite who lives in your neighborhood. You are to celebrate in the presence of God, your God, all the things you've been able to accomplish. And make sure that for as long as you live on your land, you never neglect the Levite. When God, your God, expands your territory, as you promised he would, and you say, I'm hungry for meat, because you happen to be craving meat at the time, go ahead and eat as much meat as you want. If you're too far away from the place that God, your God, has marked with his name, it's all right to slaughter animals from your herds and flocks that God has given you, as I've commanded you. In your own towns you may eat as much of them as you want. Just as the non-sacrificial animals like the gazelle and deer are eaten, you may eat them. The ritually unclean and clean may eat them at the same table. Only this, absolutely no blood. Don't eat the blood. Blood is life. Don't eat the life with the meat. Don't eat it. Pour it out on the ground like water. Don't eat it. Then you'll have a good life, you and your children after you. By all means, do the right thing in God's eyes. And this, lift high your holy offerings and your vow offerings, and bring them to the place God designates. Sacrifice your absolution offering, the meat and blood, on the altar of God, your God. Pour out the blood of the absolution offering on the altar of God, your God. Then you can go ahead and eat the meat. Be vigilant. Listen obediently to these words that I command you, so that you'll have a good life, you and your children, for a long, long time, doing what is good and right in the eyes of God, your God. When God, your God, cuts off the nations whose lands you are invading, shoves them out of your way so that you can displace them and settle in their land, be careful that you don't get curious about them after you've been destroying before you. Don't get fascinated with their gods thinking, I wonder what it was like for them, worshiping their gods. I'd like to try that myself. Don't do this to God, your God. They commit every imaginable abomination with their gods. God hates it all with a passion. Why, they even set their children on fire as offering to their gods. Diligently do everything I command you, the way I command you. Don't add to it, don't subtract from it. Deuteronomy 13. When a prophet or visionary gets up in your community and gives out a miracle sign or wonder, and the miracle sign or wonder that he gave out happens and he says, "Let's follow other gods. There are other gods you know nothing about. Let's worship them." Don't pay attention to what that prophet or visionary says. God, your God, is testing you to find out if you totally love him with everything you have in you. You are to follow only God, your God, holding him in deep reverence. Keep his commandments. Listen obediently to what he says. Serve him. Hold on to him for dear life. And that prophet or visionary must be put to death. He has urged mutiny against God, your God, who rescued you from Egypt, who redeemed you from a world of slavery, and put you on the road on which God, your God, has commanded you to walk. Purge the evil from your company. And when your brother or son or daughter, or even your dear wife or lifelong friend comes to you in secret and whispers, "Let's go and worship some other gods," gods that you know nothing about, neither you nor your ancestors, the gods of the peoples around you, near and far, from one end of the earth to the other, don't go along with him. Shut your ears. Don't feel sorry for him and don't make excuses for him. Kill him. That's right, kill him. You throw the first stone. Take action at once and swiftly with everybody in the community getting it on it at the end. Stone him with the stones that he dies. He tries to turn you traitor against God, your God, the one who got you out of Egypt and the world of slavery. Every man, woman, and child in Israel will hear what's been done and be in awe. No one will dare do an evil thing like this again. When word comes in from one of your cities that God, your God, is given you to live in, reporting that evil men have gotten together with some of the citizens of the city and have broken away, saying, "Let's go and worship other gods," gods you know nothing about, then you must conduct a careful examination. Ask questions. Investigate. If it turns out that the report is true and this abomination did in fact take place in your community, you must execute the citizens of that town. Kill them, setting that city apart for holy destruction, the city and everything in it, including its animals. Gather the plunder in the middle of the town square and burning it all. Town and plunder together up in smoke, a holy sacrifice to God, your God. Leave it there, ashes and ruins. Don't build on that site again. And don't let any of the plunder devoted to holy destruction stick to your fingers. Get rid of it so that God may turn from anger to compassion, generously making you prosper, just as he promised your ancestors. Yes, obediently listen to God, your God. Keep all his commands that I am giving you today. Do the right thing in the eyes of God, your God. Recap, day 74, Deuteronomy 11 through 13. Today God opens with a command to love him. Love indicates emotion. It's action adjacent, but emotion specific. How do you command a feeling? It's impossible to fully love something or someone we don't know, and we can only know what we pay attention to. Moses also tells them to pay attention to their hearts, because they'll be enticed into idolatry if they're not vigilant. If they stay faithful to God, no nation will overtake them. God has already proven he can defeat bigger armies. Then Moses sets up an interesting image. He says to choose between blessing and cursing, represented by two mountains, Mount Gerizim, blessing, and Mount Ebal, cursing. They'll perform the ceremony for this later, so put a pin in it for now. God says to remember his word when they sit, walk, lie down, and stand. Those things happen several times a day. He reminds them to destroy pagan worship paraphernalia, including Asherim, which are wooden poles featuring Asherah idols. Asherah is a fertility goddess of the Canaanites. They worship fertility, and based on what we've seen from the Israelites, they seem to as well. So this goddess presents a real temptation for them. God says to destroy the Asherim and high places, which are pagan worship sites usually found on hills or mountaintops or under distinct trees. There will be a major shift in how some laws and sacrifices work once they get into the Promised Land. First, there will be one specific spot where God will make his dwelling place. It'll be in the middle of the whole land, which is roughly the size of New Jersey. While Levites will be appointed to live among each tribe, God's tabernacle is the only place where they can offer burnt offerings. All the Israelites will travel to that one spot, even if their land allotment is far away. When they go, they'll worship God and make their sacrifices there. Also, when they enter Canaan, they can eat meat anytime they want, and even unclean people can eat meat. This implies that up until this point, the only meat anyone could eat was meat offered to God. And since having that offering come into contact with an unclean person would make it unclean, then unclean people had to be vegetarians by default. With this new situation unfolding in which they have to travel long distances to make sacrifices, God is basically saying, you can eat meat in your own land at any time you want. It doesn't have to be sacrificed to me first. Moses warns them not to add or subtract from God's commands. He warns about people who will mingle truth with lies as a means of enticing them little by little, giving the example of a false prophet or a diviner who provides some correct insights and then uses that wow factor to lure people away from Yahweh. Just because someone speaks truth, that doesn't make them a prophet of Yahweh. Even a false prophet can be right, but that doesn't mean we should follow them or seek truth from them. False prophets and diviners get the death penalty, not only because that's what the covenant requires for those who break the first commandment, but also as a means of protecting their covenant community from further spread of the lies. God also demands that they be allegiant to him over strangers and even over friends and family members who try to lure them into apostasy. These are intense preventative measures, but these laws are supposed to deter people from rebelling or enticing others into rebellion, and they're a necessary step in God's plan to restore humanity in relationship with him. This is meant to protect everyone. Today's God shot. 3 times today, 12:7, 12, and 18, God says something like, you shall bring your burnt offerings and sacrifices, and there you shall rejoice. When people make sacrifices to false gods, it's to appease them or entice them to give them what they want. It's an attempt at initiating some kind of response. But with Yahweh, our offerings are a response to his initiation. It's not about appeasing him. It's about rejoicing in his provision and relationship. What a contrast to every other god. All those pagan worshippers are missing out on the rejoicing because they're missing Yahweh, and he's where the joy is. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll be back reading again tomorrow.